Hello, and welcome to Bite Size Legal, where we tackle legal issues one bite at a time. My name is Drew Jenkins, and I'm an attorney licensed in the states of Georgia and Alabama. And today, we're going to continue to take a small bite out of the CARES Act that has been passed now that the coronavirus unfortunately seems to be gaining steam here in the United States. Last week, we took a quick look at the expansion and creation of a federal unemployment benefit scheme. I did mention at the outset that things were evolving and regulatory rules might change exactly how it's implemented. It does look as if the funds are going to be given directly to the states, and it is up to the states themselves in order to disperse the funds in accordance with the federal regulations. Now, turning our attention to the big deal that happened this week is the creation of the new small business loan through the SBA that is referred to as the Paycheck Protection Plan, or the PPE. We now know who it's available to, and we now know what the actual terms are. And this is a very important distinction that you should remember. There is a difference between statutory law and regulatory law. If you don't know what the meaning of this is, essentially Congress passes laws. Those laws tend to be very broad, and they typically empower an agency, or in this case the Treasury, to then promulgate rules and regulations for the efficient administration of whatever the law is. So you wind up with sort of a tier of sub-laws that help fill in the very large gaps that typically exist in congressional legislation. And the same is true here. So by way of example, the CARES Act itself allows for loans of up to 4%. However, when it actually was debuted at the regulatory level, the loans initially had an interest rate set of only 0.5%. A lot of the smaller financial institutions complain that the cost of making the loans would typically exceed whatever interest they were to gain over the term. In addition, the term, according to the CARES Act and congressional legislation, after an application is filed, maturity can still be another 10 years out. Under the regulatory layout that we have currently, it is going to be a 2-year term on the loan. In addition to that, so even though we've taken what could have been up to 4%, and by regulation they've said, look, we're only going to be charging 1%. The financial institutions themselves, being private entities, are able to then further create their own internal rules and policies around it. A good example of this would be Bank of America. In the CARES Act, there is no requirement that the borrower have a pre-existing relationship with a financial institution. But then again, when your interest rate is only 1%, it makes sense to only make loans to those individuals who have a pre-existing relationship, right? Your know your customer rules are a lot easier to comply with when you already know your customer. So a lot of the larger institutions are putting requirements in place that you be a pre-existing customer, or that you be a pre-existing customer and have a pre-existing outstanding loan with the financial institution. This is not true for all of them, so it's important to shop around. But other than that, you're going to find that they are all remarkably the same. You're going to have a 2-year term. You're going to be allowed to borrow up to 2.5% of whatever your payroll was over the 12 months prior to the disaster that we're going through. So for example, you will begin on February 15th of 2019. They're going to run your payroll for the 12 months prior to that, and there are some exceptions, but for most of you that'll work. They will then add 2.5% on top to help you pay for your utilities and other expenses such as rent or mortgage payments, and that's the amount of money that you will receive. Now, after you receive it, it will hopefully help you pay for 8 weeks worth of payroll, and then after that, you will apply for loan forgiveness. And the loan forgiveness will pay, under the regulations, it will pay for your payroll in addition to your utilities and mortgage. But up to 75% of the funds available must be used directly for payroll. However, under the regulatory guidance, they said, look, it's going to be really simple, right? Only 25% up to 25% of the loan amount may be used towards forgiveness of your utilities and mortgage payments. Basically, anything that is non-payroll, you're only going to be able to receive a maximum of 25% forgiveness of that. So it's It's a pretty spectacular program if you qualify. Almost everyone's going to qualify other than the large corporations, but then again, they have their own sort of bailout package that's coming to them. There's no loan forgiveness, but they do get a better interest rate than the small businesses do. So if it's something you've been hurting with, definitely look into it. In addition to that, there are emergency idle grants that are available as well that can give you $10,000 up front. You don't ever have to worry about paying that back again if you can show that you have seen a decrease in your income and you're still trying to keep people on payroll. Also, if you're self-employed or an independent contractor, you are still eligible for these loans. Just be aware there's going to be a little bit of extra paperwork, and don't think you can borrow the funds and use them for purposes outside of the business. The government has already said they are looking pretty strictly and severely at fraud mitigation measures in case people thinking, a 1% loan sounds really good if they could use it for things other than keeping their business up and running. So the quick bites are the Paycheck Protection Plan is live. Most lenders are making loans. You are looking at a uniform across the board package of 1%, 2-year term, forgiveness of amounts that have gone to payroll, the ability to borrow up to 2.5 times what payroll was for the last 12 months or the 12 months prior to the disaster. I hope you have found this informative. We're going to continue to go through the CARES Act together. And if you didn't find it informative, I hope you at least found it enjoyable. Feel free to leave comments below, and if you're in WeChat and Thread, and look forward to seeing you next week.